Hey everyone, welcome back to the Insignificant Bondage Project. This is where we break down the systems and stories that mess with our rights and challenge how we see the world around us. I'm your host, and today we're diving into something we all consume but might not think twice about: police TV dramas. Specifically, we're looking at how these shows shape generational attitudes toward law enforcement. Why do boomers often see police as untouchable heroes, while Generation X tends to be more skeptical? Could it be tied to decades of crime dramas pushing a particular narrative? Let's dig in and figure it out together. We all know TV is a huge cultural force, but police dramas, they're in a league of their own. Shows like Law & Order, Blue Bloods, and CSI have dominated our screens for decades. And they all share something in common. They present police officers as heroic figures fighting against overwhelming odds to keep us safe. Here's the thing though. A study by Color of Change and USC Annenberg looked at over 350 episodes of crime shows from 2017 to 2018 and found that they frequently show police bending or breaking the rules, like using excessive force or conducting illegal searches. And instead of calling it out, the narrative frames it as necessary and justified. Think about what that does to the viewer. When you're rooting for these characters, you start to believe their actions are okay, even when they cross ethical lines. Over time, this can seriously shape how people think about law enforcement. Suddenly, cops aren't just human. They're untouchable heroes who can do no wrong. Now, let's talk about boomers. If you're part of this group, or know someone who is, you've probably seen how strong the support for law enforcement tends to be. But why is that? For one, boomers grew up in the golden age of TV, a time when what you saw on the screen was widely trusted. Shows like Dragnet and Hill Street Blues positioned cops as noble defenders, stepping in to protect society during an era when fear around crime was on the rise. The political climate also played a huge role. The war on drugs and tough-on-crime policies created a narrative that danger was everywhere, and police were the only ones standing between chaos and order. These crime dramas reinforced that message, offering a comforting portrayal of officers as righteous warriors. When you've grown up with decades of TV showing you this story, it's easy to see why some boomers hold on to the idea that police are heroes who should be trusted without question. Now let's talk about Gen X. You might be part of this group or know someone who fits in. Gen X grew up in a very different world. This was the generation shaped by institutional failure and mistrust. Think about it: Watergate, the Vietnam War fallout, and economic instability were constant headlines. It was a time when questioning authority wasn't just encouraged, it was necessary. So, by the time crime dramas became mainstream in Gen X's formative years, this group was already watching with a more critical eye. They also had access to media beyond the big TV networks, independent films, documentaries, and eventually the internet. These alternatives provided more nuanced, even uncomfortable, truths about justice and policing. And let's not ignore the real-world context. The 80s and 90s were full of headlines about police misconduct, especially cases involving racial bias and brutality. For Gen X, this wasn't just something to see on the news, it was happening in their communities. When you compare that reality to the sanitized hero narratives on TV, the skepticism makes sense. Let's take a step back and think about how much media really shapes what we believe. Studies show that regular viewers of crime dramas are more likely to support aggressive policing tactics and overestimate crime rates. This is what's called mean world syndrome. When you constantly see dramatized violence, it makes the world feel more dangerous than it actually is. And you start to believe forceful policing is the answer. But here's the flip side. Recent shifts in media coverage, like increased attention to police brutality and systemic bias, are starting to change people's attitudes. Younger generations and progressives, for example, are questioning the hero-cop narrative more and more. For boomers, though, it's a tougher shift. Decades of watching crime dramas that reinforce trust in law enforcement make it harder to accept these newer, more critical perspectives. Police dramas can be cultural tools that either challenge or reinforce how we think about justice and law enforcement. Second, bridging the gap between generations starts with empathy. If someone has spent most of their life consuming media that frames police as infallible heroes, it's not easy to shift that perspective. Having open, respectful conversations that include real-world data and context can help challenge those ingrained beliefs without alienating anyone. Finally, as viewers and creators, we need to demand better. Media has the power to show the complexities of policing, instead of pushing harmful myths about infallibility and justifying misconduct. Let's ask for stories that reflect reality, both the good and the bad. Thanks for tuning in. By questioning these narratives, we can push for fairness, justice, and truth, both on screen and off. Until next time, keep questioning, stay curious, and don't stop seeking justice.